Yes, the time has come to finally release the most requested comparison video. So I've got both software updated on each phone, tested out the cameras, gaming, the battery life and more. So the main question is this: will the POCO F6 be a true successor of the POCO F3, and is it finally time to retire this phone? So for the past several videos, I mentioned that I was not a fan of this finish on the POCO F6 as I felt that POCO was trying too hard to blend into the titanium color kind of trend. Famously started from the iPhone 15 Pro series, then followed up by the Samsung S24 Ultra as well. But what I found out is that the more I use the phone daily, the more it grew into me, this whole finish of the phone. But if you force me to go into a white color smartphone finish like this POCO F3, I would go with the POCO F3 in a pinch. But that is based on a personal preference because the POCO F6 wasn't too bad as I initially thought it was. Now probably the green might look better, or perhaps the Deadpool version of the POCO F6, but since I don't have those, I can't compare that. Now in terms of which feels better in the hands, the POCO F6 feels better long term because of its more textured finish, but in terms of the camera design, call me old school, but I do prefer the camera array design on the POCO F3. So yeah, this does boil down to a personal preference, and while I would choose this POCO F3 over the POCO F4 or even the POCO F5's overall design and finish, this time around I would give this a draw instead. So the display sizes are same at 6.67 inches, and before even comparing the specs for each, by itself the POCO F3 looks good, but if you compare it side by side with the POCO F6, here's where you finally see that the F6 variant is being serious in upgrading its display. Now not only it looked great because of its thinner bezels, but the flatter design also played a huge role in making sure that the phone was ready to step up its display game. The massive peak brightness of 2400 nits and the 1200 nits of HBM, or the high brightness mode, on the POCO F6 also made looking at the display way much better, and I find it very helpful especially when taking photos and videos during the day too. And yes, there will be a camera comparison between this and this, so don't go anywhere. And while the pixel density on the POCO F6 is also higher, that is something which is not very noticeable from the naked eye because the POCO F3 still looked great while using the phone daily too. So was the responsiveness of the screen because both has a 120Hz refresh rate. Now the POCO F3 uses a side-mounted fingerprint sensor on the power button, but the POCO F6 is the first to include the in-display fingerprint sensor for this F series from POCO. Then finally, the area where I felt that the screen was way superior on the POCO F6 is the fact that the POCO F6 uses a Corning Gorilla Glass Victus compared to Corning Gorilla Glass 5 on the POCO F3. And what's weird is that even the POCO F6 Pro, the Pro version of this, comes in Corning Gorilla Glass 5 too, and is also IP64 rated as well, which is not only higher than the POCO F3 at IP53, but also higher than the POCO F6 Pro's IP54. Now, I'm not sure who came up with that decision from the POCO camp, but yeah, the display category for this POCO F6 was way better than the F3 and also the F6 Pro. Now let's go into the camera comparison. Specs wise, the POCO F6 has a little bigger megapixel value at 50 compared to 48 megapixel on the POCO F3. Ultra-wide lenses for both are 8 megapixel, but what's interesting is that POCO has decided to forego the dedicated macro lens which this had. Well, that doesn't affect me, but apparently a lot of people think so some of you will disagree with this. Now starting from the high megapixel mode, besides the slightly darker contrast, both of them look very similar. Even if you zoom in after taking a picture, the amount of details that you get is the same. As for the ultrawide lenses, the only difference between the both is the more saturated photos on the POCO F3, whereas the POCO F6 looked more real as the skies were more accurately represented. Other than that, the dynamic range and the non-existent barrel distortion was equally as great too. Then the story remains the same for the main lenses, where you can see more saturation, particularly on the blues. Both phones can zoom up to 2 times digitally, where once again the photos produce similar results, and you can go up to 10 times zoom as the max zoom, where the 10 times zoom images were better on the details on the POCO F6, and the app also does a way better job at stabilizing the 10 times zoom mode, so that would be great if you really need this 10 times zoom and use it a lot. Now, portrait mode for objects on both looks equally as great on the subject to background blur point of view, and it does very well on objects as seen in these images. When it comes to human subjects, the subject to background blur was great, but in terms of color accuracy, what's interesting is that this time the POCO F3 was more color accurate instead, but the overall subject was brighter on the POCO F6. Then switching over to the front 20 megapixel cameras on each. For the regular selfie, the background dynamic range on the skies was better on the POCO F6, where it was totally blown out on the POCO F3. And while the second regular selfie image could see some amount of dynamic range in the skies for the POCO F3, but it was not as good as the POCO F6. And that was also the case for the portrait selfie photos as well. Then as for nighttime, here's where it's all about the image processing on each phone's night modes. So based on these shots, not only the POCO F6 handles the lights better on the traffic lights and the lampposts, but the skies are more accurately black. And it did consistently well even for the ceiling downlights as seen on top on this particular image. Now even for a low light shot area like this particular image, there are more details towards the bottom right of the image on the POCO F6 compared to a more smudgy image on the POCO F3, where the reflection on the water near the middle had this weird purple color reflection, which I don't know where it came from. Then as for the main lenses, once again the colors of the skies were more accurate on the POCO F6 and he handled the lights way better. And even on this next image, the POCO F6 looks more pleasing, balancing the highlights and the shadows very well too. Then as for low light shots, while the details were way better on this main lens for the POCO F3 compared to what you saw on the ultra-wide lens, but the POCO F6 color accuracy was better in this particular scene. And if you like to take more zoomed in photos during at night, the 2x zoom image on the POCO F6 looks a tad bit better on the letters on this particular board. But what's funny is that the 5x zoom looked better on the POCO F3, but the 10x zoom was better on the POCO F6. Yes, weirdly interesting. Now, if you're taking night portrait shots for humans, the POCO F3 was strangely really dark in capturing the actual skin tones compared to the POCO F6, but the subject to background blur was good for both. Then the POCO F3 did not do a very good job on the night portrait photo for objects, as the texture of the plant's branch was more prominent on the POCO F6 as seen in these photos. Then if you love taking selfie photos at night, once again, the POCO F6 was victorious with a better skin tones and overall handling all parts of the image very well. And while the POCO F3 does better on the subject to background blur on this particular portrait selfie, but the overall image and the skin tones was once again better on the POCO F6. Where in this second image, the skin tones look more pale on the POCO F3 and not as color accurate as the POCO F6. Then as for video recording, starting from the rear, the quality for the ultra-wide lenses was equally as good. But what is interesting is that the time that the skies got exposed correctly was faster on the POCO F3, but like the photos, the skies were a bit more saturated on the POCO F3 as well. Then stabilization was really good at the max recording of 1080p using this particular lens. Then the 4K main camera stabilization was also really good too. Then as for the main lens quality, the 4K was great, once again producing more saturation on the POCO F3 even at the 2x zoom video recording as well. Now speaking of this, I'm not a fan of how the camera app, when you switch between the ultra-wide to the main lenses, it defaults at 1080p recording instead of using the 4K which I previously used, which was not the case on the camera app on the POCO F6. And then we move into the front video recording. Want to know what's funny? The dynamic range on the POCO F6 was nowhere as good as the POCO F3, where it seems like the POCO F6 was trying to expose the sky properly and then panicked and just left. Like, bye-bye. However, image stabilization wise, both did a very good job maximizing at 1080p. Then as for the nighttime videos for the rear, what's funny is that the POCO F3 did a better job on the overall quality, but had the same jitters on the stabilization for the ultra-wide lenses. But the 4K main video quality was equally as good as seen over here. Then finally for the video at night, let me just say that I don't like both of the videos produced for the front video cameras, where even the video stabilization for the front was just mediocre at best. And here's a daytime vlogging test for you to hear how the audio recording is on a vlogging situation. Alright, so this is a vlogging test. Just for context, I am up in a rooftop and then the sun is literally shining right there. The skies are very blue in my eyes, and based on what I see right now, I can see that the dynamic range on the POCO F3 seems to be a bit better, but the POCO F6 is not doing a very good job in terms of the exposure, but that is what I see.
Let's see how it is when I put this in post, but this is a vlogging test as usual, so here's a audio test. Test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2. So let me know what you guys think of the audio recording of the POCO F6 and the POCO F3 down in the comment section below.
Now, if you guys are enjoying this comparison video so far, do give this video a nice big thumbs up, because these comparison videos are honestly not easy to test, write and produce. And if you guys are new to the channel, a subscription will be very much appreciated too. Thank you very much in advance. So the 4520 milliamps battery on the POCO F3 was expected to not be so great since I've owned this phone since it was launched. So battery degrading was very present over here, and while I was still averaging about 3 hours plus of screen on time at 10% battery with dark mode turned on, the larger 5000 milliamps of battery on the POCO F6 was better off an average of 4.5 hours. And since you're looking at the 6th iteration of the phone, the charging speed on the POCO F6 is higher at 90 watts, which goes from 0 to 100% in about 36 minutes, compared to the POCO F3, which is less than half of the fast charging speeds at 33 watts, which got me reaching from 0 to 100% in close to 56 minutes, but that is to be expected since this is version 3 and this is version 6. So yes, the winner for this category obviously goes to the POCO F6 because of its newer and a larger battery. Now, as for gaming, since this is a comparison video, I did a gaming test on the most demanding game, and yes, can you guess it? It is Genshin Impact. Now, on the POCO F3, while the overheating issues when I previously tested the phone earlier this year have gone away, and this could be because of the new HyperOS update, and more on the software comparison coming on later in this video. However, the battery drain on the POCO F3 was noticeable during gaming, where I had the best gaming experience at medium settings, 60 FPS with motion blur turned off. Then as for the POCO F6, the battery drain was kept at minimal even at continued gameplay for about 15 minutes, and Genshin Impact could run at the highest settings on this phone thanks to the new Snapdragon 8S Gen 3 chipset, which is a 4nm chipset compared to a 7nm Snapdragon 870 on the POCO F3, so that is to be expected. But if you want a longer and a more comfortable gameplay, I would just say leave this at medium settings. That would be the ideal situation where it was smooth sailing all the way without any battery drain. So that is another point for the POCO F6. Now, if you want a written version of this video, we always have one for all of our videos, where you can head to our website at www.adamlogo.tv. Links to the website will be down below. Now, as for the software, as of the recording of this video, the POCO F3 has been upgraded to Xiaomi's latest HyperOS. Yep, it took my phone way longer than a lot of people out there, where it is at version 1.0.2.0, and the POCO F6 is at HyperOS version 1.0.4.0, and out of the bat, I cannot see any differences in terms of the software's performance, which was great. However, there was one weird software glitch that I've been experiencing on the POCO F6, which is when I was transferring files from the phone. Because while both has USB version 2.0, the POCO F3 could detect external SSDs, USB thumb drives easily, where the POCO F6 had issues detecting them, and while sometimes it did, it would just disappear after a minute or so. So that was really frustrating, because imagine how I had to transfer all of the pictures and the videos taken on the phone for this video. I had to literally upload every single file on Google Drive and then download it into my computer to do this video comparison. So I believe that this could be a software glitch, since both hardwares of the USB port are the same. So other than that, the software experience was quite fluid on both phones. But one thing that I found very annoying on this POCO F3 is the amount of ads popping up. It seems to come in more frequently, not only compared to the POCO F6, but in general for the past how many years that I've been using this particular phone. When it first came up, it was to a point where I really noticed it, where it was really annoying. So other than the ads, in this category, I would give this to the POCO F3 because of the whole USB issue mentioned. Other than that, the POCO F6 would have beaten the POCO F3 in this category, so hopefully there'll be a fix for this soon. So in conclusion, based on this extensive tests, I think that it's finally time that the POCO F3 has been knocked out from its throne. Because the POCO F6 seemed to win in almost every test thrown at it. But you know what's funny? It took POCO 3 years. 3 years to create a phone that is better than this POCO F3. So the question now remains, how many years will this POCO F6 be the best?